Okay, good morning, everybody. Jim Feist, Andy Iskoe in Las Vegas. We're going to talk about NFL betting, alternate lines, teasers, and a little bit of contest update from last week. Almost no one, almost no one got knocked out of the Survivor this week. Last year it was like 50-60% over the first 2 weeks. I think it was like 2% this week, Andy.
Yeah, in fact, when we do the contest, or if like I'll throw that in right here because it's so popular. Nobody, I believe, got eliminated out of the Grandissimo contest, where there were 69 contestants when it was all said and done who paid their $100,000. I think Derek Stevens had to be very happy. The owner of Circa, he had guaranteed 1.5 million for the $100,000 entry fee contest, so he needed 15 entries so he wouldn't have to contribute to the pool. Well, he got 4.5 times that with 69, so they're playing for a lot of money there, 6.9 million for one person, and I wonder if they will put up a prop. If, unlike the regular Survivor, where they're going to be over 18,000 entries this year, because there's only 69, will that contest go the full 20 weeks?
Well,
I would think not, but because the regular Survivor with so many entries, the law of numbers says that someone's going to be able to go 20-0 with the Thanksgiving and Christmas split weeks in there. But with 69, I think there's a lot lower probability of that. But to your point about the Circa Survivor, there were 18,718 entries, which means a prize pool of $18,718,000 for whoever survives the longest. I think this is the 6th year of the contest. The first 5 years have seen the contest go to the duration with splits amongst the finalists from I think 3 to 11 or something like that, depending upon the year. Last week there were only 573 eliminated, so you're talking about 3% of the field was eliminated last year to about 33%. Now, of course, there were a couple of close calls. The most popular play last week in the Survivor were not surprisingly the Denver Broncos, also the largest point spread of the week, and they got a good fight from Tennessee, but they ultimately prevailed. And depending upon when you played them against the spread, could have been anywhere. If you played early 7, 7.5 to 8.5, I even saw some 9s out there. They didn't cover for most people. The second most popular pick last week, the Buffalo Bills, and they came through to win in that crazy game. It's going to be hard to see a more entertaining game than that Sunday night game between Buffalo and Baltimore. Arizona was also a team that was very popular. They were actually, I'm sorry, Buffalo, I think, was actually not that. I was looking at a different column. Buffalo's one of the least picked teams last week. The Cardinals were the number 2 team with 4,171. And of course, they had to survive the final play of the game against the lowly New Orleans Saints. So I thought we would get between 17 and 20,000 entries. We got almost halfway between that. 718 is pretty nice. So that's a nice prize pool. And yes, form held up very much. In fact, if you looked overall at the NFL card last week, and I usually, because I've been using them for years, I used to use the Stardust way back when as my source of closing lines. When they closed, I went over to the Superbook, and I've continued to use that for consistency. And at the Superbook, we had 2 games last week that closed at Pick'em. A lot of late money on the Atlanta Falcons against Tampa Bay. That game went down to Pick. And actually, the game where Chicago back when opened the favorite. Minnesota was the one favorite most of the preseason. Money came in on that one, and that game closed pick'em. So if you looked at the 14 games where there was a favorite, albeit a short price favorite in a number of those games, 2 points or less, those teams were 11-3 straight up, but 7-7 against the points. So the points came into play a lot last weekend, and I'll talk about the significance of that when we do our segment on NFL teasers. I will mention, however, surprisingly enough, of the 18,718 entries, 24 did not submit a selection.
Oh my God, really?
I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but it's down from, I think, 45 last year who did that in week 1.
So you put up all that money to get in these contests, and you forget to put your picks in.
Yeah. I could understand 2 or 3. Maybe they're out of the country. They didn't have internet access or something like that. But 24 is a Pretty big number.
Andy, you know what it is? They come to Vegas. It's a party city. They go out, they have a good time the night, and they forget what the hell they're doing. If it happens in Vegas, it stays in Vegas. And people lose their mind when they come.
And apparently their entry fee stays in Vegas now too.
Absolutely. Talk about alternate lines. If you liked Green Bay last night, this is what I talk about alternate lines. If you like Green Bay last night, instead of laying 3.5, especially if it's 3.5, you say, well, instead of laying 3.5, let me lay 7. Now, if you lay 7, I don't know what the exact price was. They won by 9. They could have easily won by more than that. They were up 17. They dominated the game. You'd have been getting 2-1 instead of getting 91 cents on your bet. Laying 3, that's what you get back. If you lay 110, you get back 91 cents on your dollar. So you're getting 2-1. So here's what we're talking about: alternate lines, just kind of educational. So you're laying 3-1. You're $100 better. Bet $50 on the -3.5, if that's what you must do, and then bet $50 over 6.5 or 7 to get. So you feel you're going to cover anyway, but you can't think in your mind, well, it's 3.5. They're going to win by 4. You got to think a little bit differently and say, I like them to win this game, and I like them to cover the number. So why not lay the 6.5 or 7? I'll get plus money on my bet. And you can even forget about laying the 3.5, because if you lay 3.5, it's a terrible number to lay anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you're 3.5, you should try to be laying 3. You don't want to be laying 3.5 because it's such a live number. But if you have to do that, lay the 6.5 or 7 and get 2-1 on your money. So that's what I'm talking about with alternate lines.
And I was going to say, if you analyze, and it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback, or in this case, Friday morning quarterback. But if you were to look at last night's game and decide, maybe there's a play there, you take a look at last week, and the Commanders played, as we said, one of the weakest teams in the league. The New York Giants could only put up 21 points on that team. Jaden Daniels coming off of that offensive rookie of the year last year. Now they are, to use a horse racing analogy, they're stepping up in class this week, going up against the Green Bay team that's been a playoff for contender for the last several years. They beat the defending NFC North champion Detroit Lions, who now are healthy, albeit without their offensive and defensive coordinators from last year. So Green Bay put on a very good show last week against Detroit. They are now stepping down in class, facing a Washington team that most people expect to regress a bit from last year because of a lot of the way that a lot of those games ended on the final possession. And so you could have made, I think, a better case for laying 7 with Green Bay and an alternate line plus than you could have, say, with the Commanders, say, laying -3 if you wanted. If you thought the Commanders were going to be able to win the game straight up, maybe you lay 3 and you get plus 180, 210 or something like that. So when you look at some of these games, when I analyze some of these games and I'm looking for alternate lines, I'm looking to see what type of the matchups are. I do believe a lot in going up and down in class, especially if it's dramatic up and down. It's one thing to go from playing the Philadelphia Eagles to playing the Carolina Panthers and things like that. Now that's compensated for in the line, but sometimes it can't be compensated for enough.
Absolutely. And you can find alternate betting on, I don't know what book you're playing at, of course. I'm not talking to you, Andy. I'm talking about the public that's listening. You can find alternate bets. Like, for example, let's look at the Giants-Dallas game just really quickly. The Dallas played Philadelphia. Tough team, Super Bowl champ. They didn't look all that bad. Granted, Carter was out and made Dallas look a little bit better because Carter's a hell of a player. But the Giants looked terrible. Absolutely awful. Their offensive line's damaged. Their coaches questionable. And Russell Wilson looks like he should be out of the game for years now. So you look at that game. It opened 3. It's up to 5. 4.5 is out there a little bit. 5.5's out there. You just look at what the comparison that Andy just spelled out. Dallas played pretty good against the Eagles. And the Giants played awful against Washington.
A better team than they're facing this week.
Washington team is the team you saw last night. So you kind of like, whoa, there's a big difference here. And there's been a line movement, and the line movement says that -3 was the opener. It's now 5.5, in most places 4.5. Only at FanDuel.
And it had been as high as 6 a couple of days ago.
I would suspect, in my opinion, that after last night, there will be a line move on Dallas before the game kicks off.
Yeah.
And you'll see a 6 again. Because
And you've already got some turmoil on the Giants with Malik Neighbors getting into it, I guess, with the coach or something. I'm not quite sure what the details were, but it's not the relatively harmonious situation that Dallas is enjoying now that the Micah Parsons issue has been dealt with.
Correct. And Daboll is either favorite or second favorite to be fired. I would say McDaniel is number 1 for Dolphins, and Daboll would be number 2.
I wonder if there'll be a prop if McDaniel in Miami this week will last that first half.
If Patriots win that game, McDaniel will be fired that
I would
day.
think so.
Yes.
I would think so.
Now,
I mean, they're not a very good team, but it's only 2 games into the season. You want to save your season in week 2. You don't care about it in week 12.
And,
in week
and,
2,
the other thing is
games.
they look absolutely horrendous against the Colts. I mean,
they look like they were playing a 4th preseason.
The Colts scored on every play. I mean, every possession they just. I mean, that was a pretty terrible effort by the Dolphins, and this might be one of those years. I hate to say it, it looks that way. What else do you see that you want to talk about in the alternate line market?
Well, looking at some of the lines for this week.
Teasers, which is part of our.
Okay. We're going to put it all together in one segment.
Yeah, we're going to do one video. Yeah.
Okay, then let me talk about the teasers because it was very interesting last week. I talk about 2-way teasers where both teams cover in the game, and it didn't matter which side you played in a teaser. Well, last week was a situation where we had a great number of teasers go both ways. In fact, it started with the Dallas-Philadelphia game where both Dallas and Philadelphia covered in 6-point teasers, and then you go to if I can find it here, Sunday, and somewhere that's missing. I'll have to see if I can find it here. But here it is. I'm going to look a little further. Pittsburgh and the Jets, that 1-point win, the 2-point win by Pittsburgh, laying 2.5. That covered both ways. Cincinnati and Cleveland covered both ways. Cincinnati won by 1. They were laying 5, so they actually got +1 in the teaser. Basically, every other game after that on the schedule, except Detroit, Green Bay, you had 2-way teaser winners in Arizona, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Tennessee, Denver, San Francisco, Seattle, Houston and the Rams, Baltimore and the Bills both covered each way, and even Minnesota and the Bears covered both ways as a game which went off pick 'em. And even if you laid a couple of points with Minnesota and you had a cross 0 on the teaser, you still covered with their 3-point win. So 10 and 6, that's very unusual. Usually there's about 4 or 5 games a week that feature both teams in the same game covering in a teaser. This week there were 10. Now, and I mentioned I think at the start about the favorites and underdogs. Or maybe this was before we started, that last week, of the 14 games that were not pick'em, because the Bears game went off pick'em at the Westgate, as did the Atlanta-Tampa Bay game. There were 14 games in which one team was favored. The straight-up winner, with favorites were 11-3 straight up, but just 7-7 against the spread. So even with some of these short lines, we saw it in the Pittsburgh game. We saw it in the San Francisco-Seattle game. Well, no, that one San Francisco covered, but we saw it in the Buffalo-Baltimore game where you may have laid a point with Buffalo earlier on and covered. So even with some of these short-priced games, we saw the line come into play. And what that suggests, and again, remember, it's only 1 week of action, but your initial thought is to keep an eye out. Maybe this will be a season of more parity than we've seen. And, the last several years, we had teams even last year, you had teams winning 14, 15 games and teams winning 3 or 4 games. We may not see as many teams at either extreme this year. And I think there's a good reason for that as well. You take a look at the NFC North with Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit, all expected to win 10 games. Yeah, they play 11 games outside of conference, but those extra games that they play, those 3 games against each opponent, and you play them, twice, the three opponents, the 2 games you play, the 6 games in the division, you could have a lot of 3-3s, or let's say you downgrade Chicago and you have all these other teams going 4-2, 4-2, 4-2, Chicago 0-6, for example. We may see greater parity reflected not just in the results, but also in a lot of these short lines that we're seeing.
Well, you do have quite a few first-year quarterbacks actually coming into the second year of their experience. So a lot of people say, well, you might get regression, or you might get, they might go the other way and actually improve even more. Then we're obviously seeing a little bit of regression from Daniels. He didn't do all that well against a very poor Giant team, and he certainly did not do any very good against a very good Packer team, which that I'm not going to take too much away from him on that, because that's a pretty damn good team in the Packers. They could be the best NFC team. It's possible. Their defense looks incredible, and Love looks like he's found himself, and he's healthier than he was a year ago. So there's a lot to be, and you have to analyze these things, and don't overreact. Don't overreact, but don't ignore.
Yeah, don't fail to react.
It's a balancing act. Don't overreact, but don't underreact. Yeah.
One of the concerns I had last night, excuse me, just a moment, and we talked about before, Jalen Daniels. How many times did he go deep? Not very many. I'm wondering, is there perhaps some sort of undiagnosed or unrevealed shoulder injury that prevents him from throwing the ball 40, 50 yards? Yeah, Green Bay's defense, had a lot to do with it, but you still take some chances.
Well, here's what I saw in watching the game. The Green Bay defense played very well. They had a lot of pressure, and their outside rush on defense was to pinch the outside. So Daniels, who does very well running the ball, had nowhere to go. He can't go left. He can't go right. And if he's going to run, he's got to go up the middle. And that's where a lot of people are there. And he's not a big, powerful guy that's going to, like Josh Allen, is going to knock people over. He's not like that. He's quick. But when you're going through the middle, you're not going to get that open space that easily. So I think that what happens is, after a full year of Daniels, the defensive coordinators have a lot of film on him. So they realize, this is how we have to stop this guy. But so they had the whole offseason to know, we're playing this guy who was pretty dynamic a year ago. How are we going to stop him? And these guys, these defensive coordinators and their assistants are very smart. All the coaches are very smart. They're not all as good as the others, but they're all smart. They know football. So I thought they came up with a hell of a game plan to
and
stop
executed
him.
it.
And then the other side of it is, they played against the Giants in week 1, and they didn't look that dynamic in that game either. So now we have 2 games that I would say subpar performance by Daniels. Now going forward, that may be the sign of the times for Washington. They're 1-1 on the season, but that one victory was against one of the bottom 3 teams in the league. So we have to take that with a grain of salt. Moving on.
We'll find out a little bit next week, because the Commanders come out here to play the Raiders, and the Raiders, their defensive backfield is not a strength of this team. Daniel should be able to have. Now, of course, you do have Max Crosby creating a lot of havoc along the line of scrimmage, and basically having his eyes tuned on the quarterback. So Daniels may be in for a rough afternoon there. But Washington, I think their season win total last year, I want to say it was 6.5, and they almost doubled that. So it's natural to see a regression. And again, as we've talked about many times, they won a lot of close games last year that often reverses it. Just take a look at the Minnesota Vikings, who had all that success in those close one-score games in 2022 when they made the playoffs. I think they finished 13-4 or something like that. And then they ended up regressing the next year, as you would expect. All those close wins became losses, and they dropped to 7-10. I think last year we saw a little bit more of the real Minnesota. They didn't have to rely on those close wins to 14-3, I think.
Well, speaking of Minnesota, that's an interesting game itself. And J.J. McCarthy showed us a lot in the fourth quarter against the Bears the other night. The first 3 quarters, this is the first 3 quarters he's ever played on the field. Yes, he was with the team last year, learned a lot watching tape, watching the games, but he wasn't playing. now he's playing, but in the fourth quarter against the Bears, he looked like, I mean, you put this guy in the Hall of Fame on one quarter. I don't think we're going to do that.
He didn't look terrible. He didn't look terrible in the first half, but he didn't do anything to really say, kid's going to make it big. He did in the fourth quarter.
The fourth quarter was absolutely incredible. I mean, I said, what the hell am I watching here? You know, and when that line came out this week, it came out at 4.5. And I'm thinking, well, you got this rookie quarterback, had a great game. Atlanta's lost the first game. Their kicker blew the chance of getting overtime. They did hold Baker down, but Baker had the offensive line issues. So you can't really, you have to take everything with a grain of salt and look at the situation, not the score, the situation and the players that were in and out. So now it's 3.5, Minnesota. And Atlanta still has a kicker that's questionable, because not that he's not going to play. He's going to play. The question was, last year he wasn't all that great, and then he misses the field goal to tie the game at the end. How much confidence do you have in this guy? I mean, a lot of kickers last week ruined games. The Cleveland, they should have won the game over Cincinnati. I mean, you had kicker after kicker after kicker making mistakes, and a couple of them stood up pretty good. The Green Bay kicker did hit the 60-yarder to win that game against the Jets. It's early in the season. It's kind of overreaction to everything you saw, but you have to take everything with a grain of salt. This is not really a science. It's an art and a science in handicapping and analyzing. So everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. So that's just a little.
You know, a lot of people who like the Falcons this week, they would be a good candidate for a teaser, because you'd get up over 8 and 9. And not that 9's a key number, but getting over 8 where you avoid the push would be nice. You could tease them up to 9.5, or if you use a 6.5 point teaser, you can even get it on 10. Where in most places, most legitimate books, you know, if you push a teaser, it's not a loser. You just reduce the number of teams. Now, if it's a 2-team teaser, you get your money back. If it's a 3-team teaser and you have a push in there, it goes down to a 2-team teaser if you push. I think I've heard that there are some places that actually consider any a push in a teaser a loss. You want to avoid that. And I don't know, but I would imagine that, and you see it sometimes on these parlay cards that they have here, you know, where teasers push or point or you know pushes. Don't sometimes pushes win, ties win. They're called parlays where ties win or something, as opposed to ties lose. But you pay for it in the VIG. So maybe you can get a 6-point teaser where you're only laying, say, 120 the old way you used to, or even maybe minus 110. But if one of the teams pushes, it's a loss instead of a refund. So beware of that. But I think Atlanta would be a good teaser team. Baltimore might be an interesting teaser team because Cleveland has played them tough, but at 11.5, you don't get much value in teasing down to minus 5.5. You do cut it under 6. I think a lot of people might be taking a look at the Jaguars this week. That line of 3.5 seems very short for Cincinnati. But, you know, you tell me that Cincinnati's going to hold an opponent like they did last week to 16 points. You think they're going to win by 3 touchdowns. But that offense was not very sharp last week. I mean, they moved the ball, but they didn't move it very well, because I think they only had 140-something yards or whatever.
I think they had 9 yards in the second half on offense.
Yeah, I just say either the second half or fourth quarter. I think it may have been the second half. I mean, if you're looking for a team to tease this week, I think the number one candidate would be the Detroit Lions, laying 6. So you're basically getting them a pick 'em, and maybe you do Dallas, although Dallas you now have to go over 0 if that line goes back up to 6. And it sounds weird because sometimes you say, you know what, I'd rather tease Dallas from minus 6 down to pick 'em than from minus 4.5 to plus 1.5, because you're giving up 0. So maybe if that line does go up, you might consider, and I would expect for reasons you talked about earlier, after last night's effort by the Commanders, who struggled against the Giants, Dallas might make a play. You know, Buffalo is an interesting team because I can see the Jets competing with Buffalo. So even though you would be teasing Buffalo down to -0.5 or minus 6.5, they could lose that game outright. They've played the Bills fairly tough the last few years, especially at MetLife. So we don't have a lot of the really good teasable candidates, other than the other one would be the Arizona Cardinals laying 6.5 to the Panthers. So if you wanted to take a teaser that I think will be very popular this week, a 2-team teaser, you're probably looking at the Lions and the Cardinals, both of whom are playing at home after opening on the road last week, and then maybe you threw Dallas in there, but I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable going across zero with the
I have a
Cowboys.
question for you, Andy, because all
Yeah,
the suggestions that you're making for teasers are all on the favorites.
yeah.
Why not look at some of the
No, I
dogs?
did. I did have Atlanta and Jacksonville possibly as underdogs to
I could
tease up.
see taking the Jets plus 12, 12 and a half. And speaking of prices and 6.5 point teasers, 3-team teasers,
Yeah.
are we better off playing a 3-team teaser at more reasonable odds than a 2-team teaser laying 135? Because some of the places are up that high. And what is the proper price that we should be paying on a 2-team 6-point teaser? What is that?
That is if you well, it depends how you define it. I remember always looking at it as if I do the simple math, okay, if a team has a 70% expectation chance of covering in a teaser, the overall average historically has been around 68%. That's 68% of teams cover in teasers. 50% that cover the regular point spread, and then about it'd be about 18%, or actually 36% of the other 50, which works out to 18% of 100, of 100%. So 50 plus the 18 is 68. If you do the math, if a team has a 70% chance of covering, whether it be a point spread or whether it be a teaser, 0.7 times 0.7 is 0.49. So that's 49% chance that the 270% teams will come through. That's 50-50 at 70%. I've normally gone at 110. I made the break-even point at about 72% at least for the teams, and now at about 120, I think it's closer to about 74% you need to have. So it's becoming a lot more difficult to surpass the. You need to have greater confidence in teams right now as far as teasers go, as far as however you determined their percentage chance of covering, whether you did it on an individual team basis, whether you did it on a point spread range basis, whatever it is, you now need to have probably about 75% for the two teams to have a little bit better than break even, I think, at about minus 125.
So 125 would be reasonable for you?
These days for a 2-team teaser, it's not so much what's the price being reasonable; it's the percentage that you assign to the likelihood of your team covering.
Well, a year ago, what was the price on a 16? A year ago, what was the price at most books for a 6-point?
I was able to see some minus 120s at 6 points. Most places were minus 120, or many places.
And now we have some books charging 135.
Yeah. Well, that I think it may be 6.5 or 7. I mean, I have seen as high as minus 140 on 7 points. 7 points. 6, 6.5, and 7. You talked about it last week. Some places are now going down to 2-team teasers, 5.5 points.
Well, that's another issue.
You know what? That's analogous to going from 5.5 and keeping it at minus 120. That's like cutting down a can of Coke from 12 fluid ounces to 11 fluid ounces and not changing the price. Yeah, you're keeping it at 120, but instead of getting 6, you're getting 5.5 points adjustment.
Well, food manufacturers have been doing that for years, and the public hasn't even noticed it. Personally, I think you're getting, and I'm not here to promote anybody, but the local books, I mean, some of them are still staying reasonable. Some of them are outrageous. The offshores are more reasonable, and that I don't know where the market's going, but it seems like greed takes over. But they're just going to take your money. You're not going to win money laying 135 on a 6-point teaser. Over a long period of time, they're just going to rape you. So in any case, I would probably, if you have to play at a high interest or a high price place, I'd probably go with three-team teasers. Yeah. You're getting a more reasonable price on a 3-team teaser than you're on a 2-team 6-point teaser at some places. So you're going to have to look at what the prices are and do what Andy said also. Find out what the rules are on ties, because if ties lose, you do not want to play there.
Absolutely.
Please, don't do it. So you got to shop. Andy,
look. I was going to just say a couple of these other underdogs that figure to be competitive games. I happen to like the Steelers this week. I know a number of people like the Seahawks. It's about a 3-point game. You got Seattle coming across the country after opening at home. You have the Steelers coming off of that win against the Jets, and we don't know what to make about the Steelers. Is the offense as good as it seemed to appear in many cases with Aaron Rodgers, and is the defense as vulnerable as it appeared in giving up those yards and points to the Jets? But I think Seattle might be a good candidate for a teaser. That game has I do like Pittsburgh, but I don't see them winning by a margin. Maybe 4 to 7 points, enough to cover.
Well, here's another issue you should look at. If you're getting 6 extra points and you take it from 3 to 9, let's just say you do that, which is mostly the lines are 3 now, Pittsburgh 3.
Yeah.
But look at the total, 40 or 39.5. Well, 6 points is a very large percentage of the total points projected for the game. So that 6 points is more valuable to you than if the total was 49. So think about that. I'm getting 6 and the total in the game is projected to be 39. I'm getting a bigger percentage. That 6 points is a bigger percentage of what the projected score will be.
Well, in addition to that, just use 39.
That's a much more valuable teaser.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look at let's say the total in the game is 39 and the Steelers are 3. So you take the 39, you take 3 off of it, 36. You divide that by 2, you get to 18. You add the 3 points by which Pittsburgh is favored. You're looking at a projected final score by the lines maker, 21-18. So that's a low score. So 21-18, you add the 6, you've got now you've got 3 points. You're 3 points ahead, 24. To the projected points of 21.
That's my point. So when you're making these bets, think about what's going on. Just don't take a team you like and say, "Oh, I'm a big Pittsburgh fan," or "I'm a big Giant fan," or whatever, and just say you're betting money. You can be a fan, but you don't have to put money on it. So that's just think about what you're doing, because money is in your pocket until you give it away.
Yeah. And by the way, keep in mind that
we're trying to help you win. That's what we're trying to do.
And stay away from college teasers. Also,
no, don't do that.
There's great, and by the way, it's reflected in the number of times the points come into play. In the NFL, the points come into play about 16% of the time, meaning that 84% of the time the favorite wins and also covers, or the underdog wins outright and covers, and only 16 roughly percent of the time does the favorite win but not cover. In college, it's a lot closer to 7% of the time, only 75% of the time. Only 25% of the time the points matter. 75% of the time the result is the favorite wins and covers, or the dog wins outright. On more of that is the favorite winning and covering, because you've got such large
rule.
Margins.
Do not tease college games. That's absolute rule.
I know some people who do success when they do the 3-team 10-point teasers, but even then, you've got to be careful, because college football has much greater variability than the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. Andy, what would you like to close with? You got something you want to add in there?
I'm looking forward, and I don't know if it'll be as the Buffalo Sunday night game was. I certainly hope it's more entertaining than the Super Bowl was. But that's a rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs. Should be a very entertaining game. As I mentioned when we did our ATS podcast with Mark and Greg the other day, if this game were being played, I happen to like the Chiefs in this game. I think Andy Reid had that game marked before he got to the locker room after that Super Bowl loss, because he knew they were playing him. He just didn't know when. I think it's an advantage for Kansas City to be playing early in the season, when they're probably about as healthy as they're going to be, and their legs and et cetera aren't as tired as it's going to be. Because we've talked before about the accumulation of all the extra playoff games they've played over the past 4, 5, or 6 seasons, adds up to about an equivalent of another full season. If this game were played in November, I might feel more comfortable. All things being equal, I might feel more comfortable about Philadelphia. I know that I think you have the other side in this game, but I hope the game lives up to billing, and that we get the kind of game. But it's going to be hard to match last week's Buffalo.
Well, let me correct you. I have no side in this game, and the reason I don't is because even though it's a great revenge spot, Kansas City did not look all that good against the Chargers, number one. Philadelphia beat Dallas and didn't look awesome, but they had Carter out. He never played it down, and he is the reason.
Spitman.
Spitman. He is the reason Dallas Dak enjoyed, I should say, standing back there and getting this planted and throwing and doing very well throwing the ball, but he had no pressure because the guy that adds the pressure is Carter, and he wasn't in the game. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt for both of them. Both traveled. I mean, this is it's so natural. It's too obvious that Kansas City has this huge revenge and chip on their shoulder, but Worthy's out, Rice is out. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on, but they're wide receivers. They can't keep anybody healthy.
No, to me, it's a case of the Spagnola's defense, which was embarrassed by the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and didn't look all that sharp against the Chargers. Although I'm going to willing to say, with Harbaugh in his second year with the Chargers, it may be more about the Chargers being a much better team than a lot of people realize. But I have to believe that this could be a defining game for the Chiefs if they start 0-2 in a division where you could see the Chargers 2-0 and the Broncos 2-0. I'm not going to say things are hopeless, but the Chiefs are only going to get weaker as the year progresses.
Absolutely. All right, Andy. Thank you very much. This is great. I wish you a very successful weekend with all your plays, all your action, and all the folks out there.
And to you as well, and to all of our listeners and viewers.
Make sure you please subscribe, like, follow, hit the bell. Make sure you ring the bell so you get notices, and send in comments. And we love to answer them. And
questions. If there's some questions you have about teasers, alternate lines, or the contest, because that's the focus of this feature, absolutely ask those questions.
Thank you, everybody.